Imagine if a superpower tried to buy a piece of the world. In 2019, the President of the United States asked Denmark a real official question: would you sell us Greenland? At first, everyone laughed. Memes, jokes, late-night shows, it sounded insane. But here's the twist. This was not a random joke, and Greenland is not just a block of ice. Under the snow and silence, this island controls access to the Arctic, sits between America, Europe, and Russia, and may be hiding resources that could shape the next 50 years of global power. So why does the US care so much? What is really under the ice? Let's start with the real story behind that crazy offer.
In reality, Trump was not the first American president to look at Greenland and think, we should own that. Right after World War II, in 1946, President Harry Truman secretly offered Denmark $100 million to buy Greenland. Back then, the Cold War was just beginning. The United States and the Soviet Union were turning the Arctic into a potential front line. Greenland, sitting between them, suddenly looked valuable. Denmark said no, and the idea faded from the headlines, but not from Washington. Decades later, the same island is back on the agenda. A different president, a different era, but the same simple question: why this place? Why an island with fewer than 60,000 people, buried in ice, far from almost everywhere? To understand that, you can't look at a normal map. You have to turn the globe and look from above the North Pole. When you do that, Greenland stops being the edge and starts looking like the center of a very important game.
When you look at Greenland on a normal world map, it just seems like a big white block at the top, far away at the edge of everything. But when you look at Earth from above the North Pole, the picture completely changes. You suddenly realize that Greenland sits right between North America, Europe, and Russia. In other words, Greenland is a bridge between North America and Europe, a gate between the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean, and one of the key entry points into the Arctic. The US already has an important base in Greenland, Thule Air Base, recently renamed Pizzafix Space Base. What does this base do? It helps detect intercontinental ballistic missiles that might come over the Arctic. It tracks satellites and objects in space, and since the Cold War, it has been one of the key eyes and ears watching for threats coming from Russia. So for the United States, Greenland acts like an early warning eye. But that is only part of the story, because with climate change and global warming, as the ice melts, Greenland's importance is rising even more. Why? Because new sea routes are opening in the Arctic. Right now, ships traveling between Europe and Asia sail long distances through the Suez Canal. But if the ice melts enough, ships will be able to use shorter Arctic routes over the top of the world, saving both time and money. What does that mean? Less fuel, shorter travel times, lower costs. And who is sitting right next to these new routes? Of course, Greenland. Whoever has influence near these new shipping lanes can become one of the great trade empires of the 21st century. This is why Greenland is not just an island, it is a strategic keystone for military power, trade, and geopolitics. But location is only half of the story. The other half is hidden beneath the ice.
Look at a map of resources instead of political borders, and suddenly, Greenland looks completely different. Beneath the ice and rock, geologists believe there could be huge reserves of value: oil and natural gas, major mineral deposits, and, most importantly, rare earth elements. Rare earths are the quiet backbone of modern technology. They don't sound exciting, but without them, almost nothing in our high-tech world works. They are inside the screen you're looking at right now, inside phones and laptops, inside electric car batteries, inside wind turbines, inside precision missiles, radars, and stealth aircraft. Every advanced military and every advanced economy depends on them. And here is the problem for Washington. Today, most of the mining and processing capacity for rare earths is dominated by China. That means that in a real crisis, a strategic rival could, in theory, choke off the materials needed for both the US economy and its defense industry. So when scientific surveys suggest that Greenland may hold significant rare earth deposits, people in the Pentagon and in the White House pay very close attention. And it's not just about rare earths. As Arctic ice retreats, offshore drilling becomes easier, onshore mining sites become more accessible, fishing grounds move north, and brand new routes for shipping and tourism begin to appear on the map. Think of Greenland as three things at once: a potential energy hub, a future supplier of strategic minerals, and a platform for new industries in the far north. From the American point of view, letting Russia or China dominate that future would be a serious, long-term strategic mistake. That is why, in many US strategy discussions, Greenland now looks less like a remote, empty island and more like an unopened treasure chest sitting at the very top of the world, a chest no great power wants its rivals to control.
While the United States debates what to do about Greenland, other powers are already moving fast in the Arctic. Russia has treated the far north as a priority for years. Along its Arctic coastline, it has rebuilt military bases, airfields, and radar sites, and stationed bombers and air defense systems close to the pole. It also operates the world's largest fleet of icebreakers, ships that keep its northern waters open by breaking sea ice. That gives Moscow control over the northern sea route, a shortcut between Europe and Asia along Russia's coast that is becoming more important as the ice melts. China is taking a different path, but with a similar goal: influence in the high north. It calls itself a near-Arctic state, has built research stations, invested in northern ports and energy projects, and promotes the idea of a polar Silk Road across Arctic waters. As the climate warms, both Russia and China are positioning themselves to profit from new resources and new sea routes in the north. And right between North America and this emerging arena sits Greenland. Officially, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, a NATO member. In practice, it is also an autonomous territory with its own government and its own choices about foreign partners and investments. For Washington, that is both an opportunity and a risk. If the U.S. deepens cooperation now, with security ties, infrastructure, and investment, it can keep a friendly strategic territory on its side. If it moves too slowly and Russian or Chinese money and influence arrive first, America could lose a crucial foothold at the top of the world. That is why in the Arctic, many of the real battles are not fought with tanks and ships, but with contracts, funding, and long-term relationships. And at the center of that quiet contest, Greenland is becoming one of the most valuable pieces on the global chessboard. On the map, Greenland is still part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but politically, the reality is more complex. Greenland is an autonomous territory. It has its own parliament, its own government, and wide control over its internal affairs. Most of the people who live there are indigenous Inuit, whose ancestors have survived in this harsh climate for centuries. So this is not the 19th century anymore. You cannot simply write a check, sign a treaty, and move people on a map like pieces on a board. When Trump's interest became public, Denmark called the idea absurd. Greenland's leaders were even more direct. Greenland is not for sale. Behind that statement are two big ideas. First, a desire for identity and independence. Many Greenlanders do not dream of becoming American or staying Danish forever. They dream of one day becoming fully independent. Second, a rejection of old colonial logic, the idea that land can be traded like property without the consent of the people living on it. Under modern international law and public opinion, it is almost impossible to imagine Greenland being literally sold to anyone. But that does not mean the struggle over influence is over. If anything, as Greenland becomes more important, the debate over its future path is only just beginning.
The race for the Arctic has already started, and Greenland is right in the middle of it. So what do you think? Should places like Greenland stay neutral and independent, or fall under the influence of big powers? And do you think the US will try again to increase its control there? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want more deep dive geopolitics videos.